Hey guys, Pastor Matt Chandler here. One of the themes that comes out in The Overcomers over and over and over again is the centrality of God's Word to encourage and build up His saints. It's why I love Dwell Bible app. It's an app for listening. I kind of use it in the margins of my day. I like to listen to, depending on my mood, Mark or Felix. Throw on some ambient music, and then in my truck or in my study or in a few minutes between this meeting going into that, soak again in the Word of God. They've given us kind of an awesome deal here for a yearly subscription. If you go to dwellbible.com/overcomers, they're giving us 25% off an annual subscription. So if you're looking for more Bible in your life, in the margins of your life, not just kind of traditionally listening, but listening while you work, listening while you drive, I couldn't recommend the Dwell Bible app more highly.
I don't know. I can't pinpoint looking back when that moment was, but I do know there was a moment where I think I thought to myself, if I continue this, I won't be here anymore.
Yeah.
There will be a moment where I can't come back from it.
Well, welcome to this episode of The Overcomers. I am joined with Becca Burt. Now, is it Rebecca or is it just Becca?
It is Rebecca.
Becky? It is Rebecca.
Oh, not Becky.
Not Becky. So I couldn't call you. No.
No.
Okay.
No.
So Becky's out of bounds.
Yeah.
Okay. So this is Becca Burt. And Becca has been at the church for a long time. Actually, Becca, I would see Becca in the crowd simply because you would dye your hair different colors.
Yeah.
So I remember like bright lime green once, pink. You loved you some pink. There were multiple
I love
seasons.
Pink. Love
multiple
pink.
seasons on pink. So there's not a lot of that in Flower Mound, Texas. And so and so yeah, I could just say, oh, the lady with pink hair.
Yeah.
And then you shot a testimony video for us, and I remember being so encouraged by your story, and just blessed to hear all that the Lord had brought you through. And so then I got an email from someone on staff. I think it was Lindsay Ingeberg. And who's on season 1 of Overcomers. And she said, "What do you know about this woman?" And it was pink hair lady. And so I said, "Man, I don't know a lot. I know she has a testimony video that I remember and was moved by, and I see her frequently in the lobby. I think her parents go here, yada, yada, yada." And then we hired you. You're like big time senior director czar of communications or something. Is that the exact title?
Queen. No, I'm just kidding. No
Yeah.
czar.
No czar, just
yeah.
queen. Okay.
Yeah.
And so, Becca, I'm glad you're here. It's been
Thank you.
awesome to get to know you and see up close your walk with the Lord and your immense talent the last couple of years as you've been on staff, been a director with us, and create beautiful things. And so I appreciate that. So I was so eager and hopeful that you would say yes when I asked you to come on, because as I'm doing ministry in and around the next gen, so much of what you've been through and endured seems to be kind of a consistent story for the next generation, specifically of young women. And so I thought, oh man, if Becca could share her story, maybe we can help some of those young women. And I think it'll land on some young men also, but specifically for young women, I thought, gosh, if I can get Becca's story in front of them, I think the Lord would really use it in a profound way. So thanks for being on.
Yeah, thank you.
Our family of origin shapes things. It shapes kind of a personality type or a drive or a shrinking or driving. So talk a little bit about the environment you grew up in, how that kind of formed you, and get us kind of into the aspects of your life where we're going to begin to talk about kind of achievement and sports and all of that.
Yeah, I grew up in Flower Mound. Born and raised. So yeah, this has been my home for the bulk of my life. My parents, they do go to the village. They started attending with me. They have been happily married for quite some time. I hate to say this, but I can't remember the exact number, but it's 45-ish, I would say, years of marriage. And so they've just been really steady in my life. I'm the youngest of three. I am the baby, and I love it.
Yeah.
I love being the youngest child.
So much making sense to me right now.
There are benefits for sure. But we, living in Flower Mound, it is very much an active town.
Yeah.
It is primarily upper middle class. People do a lot here. And so I have just grown up playing every sport imaginable. I grew up playing the piano.
Yeah.
So I took piano lessons from a young age. I might have been in a few competitions, which are pretty hardcore. But I did a lot. I was involved in a youth group. Growing up, we went to a local church in Flower Mound and were really involved in the youth group. But I had a really great childhood. There were a lot of things that happened in my childhood that were really hard. But for the most part, my parents did a really great job of just allowing us the freedom and the ability to just do what we were excited about and what we wanted to do. I mean, if you think about, I had the opportunity to do almost any sport that I wanted to do. I had the ability to be involved in things at school that some kids didn't have the opportunity to do. Yeah. And so I think there was just a lot of love and a lot of care in a place that is fast paced and can be really difficult to maintain an image in. But my childhood was pretty sweet.
Did you become a Christian as a little girl?
I did. I became a Christian in Mrs. Waters' second grade Sunday school class. I will never forget. She did everyone put your head on the desk, and if you would like to accept Christ, you can raise your hand. I was the last of the siblings to accept Christ into my heart. And so I did it a little bit because I didn't want to be the last one. I wanted to be like my siblings. And I did it also because I wanted I wanted that joy and that feeling that they had. But, looking ahead, and there is a little bit of that achievement of I wanted to do something that my siblings had done. And so I accepted Christ in my heart. At 7, I was baptized that year, and then just continued on. We kind of did a little bit of a Baptist, non-denominational lifestyle of churches. And so I did the kind of the Awana thing, but I also did really the kind of Bible church youth group thing growing up. But yeah, it was sweet.
How old were you when you and maybe your family figured out that you actually were not just a normal little girl athlete, but you actually had you had a gear maybe that other little girls didn't?
I would say 3 years old. And let me tell you why.
Yeah, tell the story.
Because you know kids sports, it's herd ball. Any sport that has a ball involved, it is herd ball.
That's
and
right.
every kid
Everybody
is running towards the ball, and then they run with each other, and they just kind of chase each other around the field.
No spacing.
No, and then there's the kid who sits in the field and picks the flowers. Mm-hmm. I was the one with the ball. Yep. I was the one who had the ball and was leading other people down the field.
They were chasing you.
They were chasing me.
Right.
And so I think my parents figured out at a really young age that I had something.
Yeah, you had the juice, the sauce.
And I loved it. Yeah. I loved soccer. Out of all the sports that I played, I kept coming back to soccer. And so, I think at just a really young age, they said, okay, we're in, and we're going to continue to coach you and continue to put you in these spaces.
Okay.
So,
and that kind of becomes identity forming for you in a way?
Yeah. I mean, when you are being told that you're good at something, that makes an impact on you, and you want to hear more of it. And I am naturally wired to be an achiever. I am naturally wired to want positive reinforcement. I don't typically shy away from encouragement, and so, there are people who say, no, I don't want to hear it. No, I like to hear it. Now I've gotten to a point where I'm okay. I don't really. You can turn the camera away from me, or you can turn the spotlight. But at that point in time, I really fed off of it, and so I knew I was good. My parents told me I was good. I could see it as I got older for myself, and so I pushed after that.
Come on, and was that then overflowing into the other areas of your life? Like, were you now, if you're thinking about being your student or in a friend group, or was that was that kind of desire, like this thing that I have in soccer, I'd like my whole life to, where you become kind of consumed being the best at everything?
Yeah. And everything came a little bit more naturally to me. And so I was good in school. I made really good grades. I was mostly, an A student with that occasional B that would drive me nuts. But I was part of those honor societies. I was on the varsity soccer team. I just did as much as I could do to see that line item of here are all the accolades that you got. When you go to a graduation and you see all the list of achievements, I wanted my list to be longer, and it bothered me when it wasn't. And then there was the moment of, okay, you just got to get over it. It'll be okay. But there was a part of me that actually I internalized that, and I felt that there was something there that I wanted, and I wanted to try to achieve it, whatever means I could get.
And predominantly a good girl, like not partying, leaving the boys alone for the most part.
No, I didn't have time for boys. I spent a lot of time out at soccer practice. I spent a lot of time at school, doing things. If I was going to the youth group night on that Wednesday night, and so I really do think my parents honestly were like, you know what, she's fine. She's not going after kids or boys. She's not going after
the golden child.
know, and I think I actually talked to my parents recently and said, you never actually gave me a curfew growing up.
Yeah.
And my mom said, it's because we knew you were too tired to go out afterwards. You would stay home. You were a homebody after that. We didn't have to give you a curfew. You gave yourself a curfew because I had stuff to do. I didn't have time for anything else.
Yeah.
So.
And so in this achievement how does the fear of failure or the fear of not measuring up or how does that start to pop up early on? I mean, I know how it's going to manifest. I know where we're going in the story, but how does it start to first manifest? Like, oh my gosh, I might fail here, or what if I'm not as good as maybe this person? Or how did that first start popping up in your heart, mind, whisper?
I think it was anxiety, that pit in your stomach would start to appear more for me. And a lot of it started more in high school. I think in middle school, you don't really have words to put around it. Yeah. You don't know what's happening. You might feel a certain way, but you have nothing to put boundaries around for it. And so you sort of ignore it. You play with your friends and you just move on. Yeah. And I think in high school, I started to have more awareness, and I would feel a pit in my stomach if I didn't do something well, or if I made a mistake. I'll give you an example. When you're on a roller coaster and you go up to the top and you're about to go over, and your stomach, it feels like it's kind of going up into your throat. I would get that, and it would be a paralyzing moment where all of a sudden my body would freeze up. And I couldn't move. If someone was walking towards me, I would not be able to walk towards them. I was kind of stopped. And so there was those moments started to manifest more, probably freshman year of high school, where I was feeling anxiety for the first time in a way that I hadn't felt before. And it would happen again when maybe I forgot to do something on my homework, or I got a poor grade on a test,
and poor grade being that pesky B.
Yeah, or there's probably some C's in there.
Okay,
I like to block those out of
Yeah, C's average. Can't do that.
But yeah, or I didn't play well in a game, and I heard it from my coach or from my parents, where they had constructive criticism. They grew up around sports, so they knew the game better than most parents did, and so that feeling would come in more often than not. Yeah.
Okay. And then how does that? It starts with kind of the stomach coming up into the chest, and how does it begin to manifest itself physically in your life as you get into high school, and as it grows, and as in some ways the stakes start to increase as grades matter more now because I want to go to college, and soccer matters more now because I want to go to college, and how does it start to physically manifest itself, that anxiety, as you move into high school? Yeah,
I have always looked different than the kind of typical athlete that I think society has in their mind. And so even though I was good at soccer, I didn't look like a true and I say a true again, in society's mind of what a true athlete would look like.
Okay.
And so I focused on that, and I made that my mission to fix it.
Okay.
I wanted that to be an achievement of mine. And so what I started to do was I started to purge after meals.
Okay.
I said, okay, if I think it's because I am overweight, I'm fat. And so I said, okay, well then I'm going to try not to eat as much. And the only way I can do that is if I go in the bathroom and I throw up my food.
Okay.
And so that was, it was a moment of shame and of fear, because I had entered into this new space that I wasn't familiar with, and I didn't know I could do that. But then there was this rush afterwards of, okay, but I've managed the situation. I am in control of this now. And it's that high you get after something else. If you, it's a little bit of this exhilaration, but also mixed with trepidation. And so, it became a new habit of mine.
And as this kicks off, what's your relationship with the Lord like? I mean, you're a youth group kid, you're going to youth camp, I guess. You've got these retreat things that students do. What's your relationship with the Lord like in this time?
I think I started to realize that everything I was doing, it was for checking off a box. Okay. I loved, back in the day, all those good old Christian bands back then with all their worship songs. I loved all that. I loved listening to that. I loved doing all the praise hand movements in youth group worship time. But I think I just did it because it was fun and I liked it. Yeah. And I liked the feeling that I got. There was a little bit of a pattern of, if it makes me feel this way, if it makes me feel good, I will do more of that. And I think I had a view of God as someone who was outside of me. I knew him. I knew what he was like, but I didn't love him in the way that I should. And so he was there, and he was off to the side. I could go to him if I needed to, but I did not have a personal relationship with him that I should have had at that point.
All right. So you're purging, you're eating, you got to kind of play the part for your mom and dad. So you're sitting at the dinner table, you're eating, you're eating your Chick-fil-A or whatever, and then you're going to the bathroom purging. And this starts in 10th grade, 11th grade?
I was probably about 14.
Okay.
So probably freshman, sophomore year of high school.
Yeah. Yeah. And then that kind of sticks with you through high school?
Yeah. I probably wasn't doing it a whole lot in high school. I think I was purging fairly consistently, but it was not on a daily basis. Okay. I think that it was more of, I can't give you a time frame, but it wasn't something incredibly consistent until I got to college.
Okay. Yeah. And so for all the anxiety and fear and trying to control and manage, you get a scholarship to play ball in college. Yeah. Which is not like a D3 school, but if you make a D3, that's amazing. But it's like D1, legit soccer program, dreams coming true. Yeah. Right. And so you head off to college, but you don't leave this at home, right? No. This comes with you. So now all your dreams have come true, and yet it's not working. No, not working at all. I think that I started to see some patterns appear more. The achievement was just increased when you are playing at that level. Stakes are higher. There is money on the line. There is actual money on the line in the form of a scholarship, where you are being held to standards. In order to keep your money, you have to play at a certain standard. You have to have a certain grade, GPA. There are things that are in place that if you don't make those happen, then you could lose you lose things, and you lose financially, but you lose in other ways as well. And so those stakes were high for me, and I wanted to achieve them. I'm the first of I don't know how many in my family that have gone on to get a scholarship to play a sport in college, and that's a big deal. And I wanted to make people proud, and I wanted to make myself
proud, but also make myself look good, you know, and in the vain way that we all are. You know, I wanted it to be successful, and so I could feel all of that just continuing to bubble up, and the anxiety continuing to bubble up, and there were a lot of other factors that started to play into that as well.
Okay.
Yeah.
Come on.
I mean, I think the theme of college for me was. The theme of a lot of the anxiety came in the form of men. There were kind of two different lanes of abuse that I endured. Some of that was verbal and emotional abuse from my coach, and some was actual physical abuse from men in school. There was a time at a party that I was beaten up by a guy because I didn't want to have sex with him. There was, and that was a really traumatic moment in my life because it showed me that I was a piece of property, that I was something to be looked at and to be touched, but not to be seen in a way that was godly. And when I refused that, the consequences were physical pain. And so that not only increased my anxiety, but it caused me to look at myself in a way that the world was looking at me, where then, okay, if I'm not this way, if I don't look this way, then how can I get myself to look this way? How can I get myself to look better? How can I make this not happen? It's distorted. I mean, you all the thoughts that you have are not thoughts that you should have, but it's pretty incredible to see where your mind will go. Looking back at it now, where I think all the things that I thought are so untrue. Like, no, you were the victim here. You were in the other person was in the wrong, and yet you are thinking that you need to change or do something different. And so that was a big moment. And I suffered through it alone too, and that was really hard. And then just with the verbal and emotional side of things, everything was a competition. Everything was a fitness test. Everything was a ranking. Everything felt like you had to achieve a certain level of performance and perfection in order to be a good soccer player. It wasn't just about your skill. It was about how fast you could run. It was about how much you could bench, how much you could squat. And I will be honest, there were times when we were in the weight room and we were having to check the tone of our legs to see who needed to do a little bit more in the weight room that day. And for someone who never has fully looked like an athlete, that is devastating. And it just proved to me that once again, my physical self, the outward parts of me are what are truly important for me to achieve. It wasn't about what was inside my heart. It was about what was outside of my body. And that was perpetuated by the people that I was looking up to on staff. And so,
well, one, I don't want to go too fast past that. That's like awful, heartbreaking stuff. And so I'm sorry, as someone who knows you and loves you, it kind of provokes I'm sorry.
Yeah. Thank you.
I wonder how much, because what you're talking about is experiencing, I'm not seen as a person, but rather as something to either be consumed or enjoyed or to perform for someone else's ends. And kind of a loss of personhood in that. I wonder, and I think why I wanted you to be able to tell your story today is because I wonder how much worse it even is now when that's broadened so much further with social media. So it's not just the women or men on their teams. It's not just a single coach. It's not just but an overwhelming pressure from society, regardless of domain, to look a kind of way, to behave a kind of way, to achieve a kind of way. Even if I think about pastoral ministry, and I think about for young guys going into ministry, like the metrics that get put in front of them of size and speed and, fast and famous. And you're just like, these are ridiculous metrics. It's obedience to what the Lord has for us. Like we don't get to decide outcomes. God decides outcomes. So in this season where in a real way between that assault and then kind of the more 1,000 paper cuts of playing D1 sports with a coach who isn't in tune with you as a person, but kind of sees you as a commodity that needs to perform for him. How are you starting to manage then your inner turmoil when now the achiever's in distress?
I didn't.
Okay.
I managed it by avoidance. I managed it by numbing. And so there was a lot of drinking.
Okay.
There was a lot of smoking.
Okay.
There was a lot of, what can I do to not feel this?
Okay.
What can I do to avoid it? I didn't have a church home in college. I avoided going to church. I actually did do a Bible study at one point with some of the girls on my team, but it was so that I was there and they saw me there, and I didn't have to answer any questions about why I wasn't there.
Yeah.
But my heart wasn't in it. And so that was how I handled it. And it's funny, I do like to avoid in a lot of things. I like to say, oh, it'll be fine. I like to say, we'll get through it. We'll move past it.
Yeah.
That's for future Becca. But in that moment, I chose tangible ways to avoid. So again, I drank a lot. I did things that I just shouldn't have done.
Yeah.
And I allowed myself to check out as my anxiety escalated, and then also as my body sort of just deteriorated under the pressure of it.
And so now the purging's moving from every once in a while to far more consistent?
Oh yeah, multiple times a day.
Okay.
And I had also started to overexercise, which is ironic because in sports, you're exercising pretty frequently as it is. And so I started to do that and kind of just watch what I ate. I wanted to ensure that, if my coach is telling me that I need to lose 10 pounds in order to be faster, well, then I need to lose 10 pounds. And so I need to not eat as much as the rest of my teammates are eating. So all of that, it just became kind of this menu of things to choose from in order to maintain it.
One of the ways we're able to bring these stories to you is by partnering with organizations that I've grown to trust and appreciate and love over the last couple of years. The Dwell Bible app, if you followed my ministry, I've mentioned it before. It's just one of my favorite tools, like in my own devotional life, in my own study life, to find more ways to hear the Word of God, to absorb the Word of God, to have the Word of God top of mind for me. And so I've used it devotionally. I've used it in regards to just, I'm currently studying the book of Daniel. And so all day today, I've had the Daniel read by Mark with ambient music in the background playing on my phone in my truck as I, walked outside a little bit earlier this morning, just finding ways to have the Word of God absorbing into my system, and the design, the beauty of the app, the various kinds of music that can play under, the accents that can go to. There are so many aspects of the app that could serve to stir your affections for Jesus, depending on preference and desire. And so I commend the Dwell Bible Study app to you. Hey guys, Pastor Matt here with my beautiful bride, Lauren Chandler, and we are excited to partner with Compassion International in this season of The Overcomers. Really, I think we have sponsored a child almost the entirety of our marriage, which is coming up on 25 years. And so we love Compassion International, not just because they've got this stated mission that we want to rescue children out of poverty in Jesus's name, but it's really how they go about doing that that drew our hearts to Compassion. One, they're serious about the child. They want to make sure the child is fed and has clean drinking water and has medical services available and the best education possible. But then on top of that, It's always a community project with compassion through a local church. So all of those things are happening in a community through a local church. And by doing it that way, the entire community begins to be transformed over time.
If you'd like to be a part of giving a hope and a future to a child and transforming a community, you can text Overcomers to 83393, or you can go to compassion.com/overcomers.
What were kind of the physical effects of that as you kind of fully give yourself over both to drinking and smoking and a little bit more of a licentious lifestyle, not the one that we talked about earlier where it's like Becca doesn't need a curfew because Becca's going to bed.
Yeah.
But now it's not Becca doesn't need a curfew. Now it's Becca's going out.
Yeah. It's 10 p.m. and I'm getting ready to go out. Yeah.
Training harder than ever and eating less, and whatever she does eat, she tries to purge out. So start to talk about some of the physical ramifications of this spiral that you find yourself in.
Yeah, I was tired. I was mentally tired. I was emotionally tired. I was physically tired. And the anxiety just continued to grow. And I mean, it got to a point where I had a panic attack. I had just a full-blown, I cannot breathe. I cannot stop crying. I don't know. I don't know what don't know what I'm doing. I don't know what's happening to my body right now, but I can't control it. And I ended up in one of my coach's offices. And I feel so bad because I look back and here was this, 23-year-old woman at the time, sitting across the desk from someone who is I was just a mess.
And I was 20 at the time, 19, 20, 21?
Yeah, right, 19 or 20. I just said, I'm having a panic attack. I don't know what to do, but I cannot continue to do what I'm doing. I dread going to practice. I dread playing in our games. I get physically sort of ill just thinking about it. I can't go on. I don't know what to do. I need you to tell me what to do.
Yeah.
And the response was, well, you can either just continue to do what you're doing, just keep playing, it'll be fine, or why don't you take some time and just not play? Those were the two options. Yeah. And you look back and you think, where were the medical options? Where were the psychological options? Yeah. And there weren't any. And I think that it's really unfortunate. And I think there are a lot of people even now struggle with that, of how to help people in those moments. Yeah. And I think it was just, there was no help there. There was no manual on how to fix it. There should have been in that moment, and there wasn't. And so I chose the other option of, I'm just going to leave. I'm not going to play right now. I will just not go to practice. I won't play in the games, and I will just figure it out. It'll be okay. Yeah. In whatever form that comes in, it'll be okay. Yeah. And so, I stopped playing. And I did not tell anyone that I stopped playing. Obviously my team knew, but my parents didn't know. Yeah. My friends didn't know. I just stopped going. And then I realized that now I had all this free time to continue to do the things that I was doing. And so I jumped headfirst into just feeding my eating disorder. And so I exercised more. I ate less, and whatever that was still left inside was purged. Okay. And you could see it physically on me that there was a sharp turn at that point, from the outward looking at me. And then also just inwardly, I just put myself into anything that was going to distract me from having to actually deal with what I was going through.
And that was more drinking, that was more partying.
It's just everything multiplied. Okay. Yeah.
And you already said this, but no, at this point, no relationship with the Lord, or just kind of...
Yeah, I would occasionally check out, the local church scene, and I think I went to probably 3 or 4 different churches. Okay. Random Sunday, someone would invite me, or I would even say, let's go to church, and so I would do that, but nothing. Again,
but
no
you're not
church
praying
home
right now. You're not going, God help me.
No, in fact, it was more of, God, why are you doing this to me? Okay. Why am I feeling this way?
Yeah.
I'm not a journaler. I start one and then I stop it. But I have some from that time, and it is heartbreaking. It is a lot of all caps, underlined, I hate this. Why is this happening to me?
Yeah.
I feel alone. I was pretty broken.
Okay. And is there a tipping point or a breaking point that finally exposes all that's going on to the broader circle of your life?
Yeah, I don't know. I can't pinpoint looking back when that moment was, but I do know there was a moment where I think I thought to myself, if I continue this, I won't be here anymore.
Yeah.
There will be a moment where I can't come back from it.
Yeah.
And so I reached out to my parents and I said, I need to talk to you. And I was home, and I'd come home and I sat across the couch from my mom and just told her, hey, I've actually been lying to you for a really long time. I actually haven't been playing soccer this past season. Every time you've called and asked how the game went, and I said, oh, we played well, I actually didn't play.
Yeah.
And also, oh, by the way, I've been struggling with an eating disorder.
Yeah.
And you look back on that. I look back on that now, especially because I am a mom now, and I can't even fathom how heartbreaking that was for her.
Yeah.
Because she and I are very similar in a lot of ways and have a lot of the same struggles in some ways. And to see just this like air rush out of her was painful. And I knew that my disease and my sin and my choices were affecting others now.
Yeah.
It wasn't just about me. I could hide when I was at school. I could hide among, my friends who weren't believers, who wouldn't press into those issues, but I couldn't hide anymore. And so I saw that in front of me. And it was really heartbreaking, but it was like ripping the Band-Aid, but ripping it really slowly and really painfully at that point. Okay. So, and then the cat was out of the bag.
Yep.
It was time to open up another chapter.
Okay. And then you can't tell mom and dad something like that and them not rally to try to help you fix it. So what happens next? You tell mom.
Yeah.
You can see it's kind of like a punch to mom, and then what follows that? Yeah,
I think my parents did what they knew to do best, and you joke of like, okay, you get those baby books when you have a child. There is no chapter in any of those books that says, okay, when your child goes through a crisis like this,
That's
or
true.
when your child decides to leave home, or when they struggle with an eating disorder. There is nothing in those books to tell you how to handle it.
There's not.
And so I don't fault them for any of the things that they did in trying to help me move through this. They wanted me to get help. And so for my parents, it was, we got to get her physically healthy first. And then we got to figure out what else we need to do. And so there were a lot of doctor's visits. There were psychologists, there were psychiatrists, there were, it was going to my general practitioner, and I fought against all of it. I mean, the anxiety that I felt, even just sitting and talking about it, I would sit and I noticed that I would pick at my fingers when I would talk about about what I was going through. And there would be moments when I'd look down and my fingers were bloody.
Yeah.
I had picked them so hard during all of this because I was so anxious. I didn't want to talk about it. I didn't want to tell anyone about it. But my parents just, no, you have to get healthy.
Yeah.
We have to help you. We don't know what else to do. All we know how to do is schedule appointments and try to talk to you, even though you won't talk to us.
Yeah.
And so there were a lot of tears. There was a lot of fights, because it was like, okay, I'm going to tell you, but no, I don't want to do anything about it. I've told you, that's it. We're good now. But in reality, obviously you have to move through it.
And did you move back home then after the confession, or did you confess, go back to Fayetteville, and then there's a distance by which they're trying to manage you?
I stayed in school.
Okay.
But what's really frustrating and sad is that I lost my scholarship.
Yeah.
I stopped playing. We made the decision to officially stop playing, which meant that I would no longer have essentially a full ride to school. And that was just a blow to me because I could no longer achieve the ability to not have my parents have to pay for my school, in which it's just like kicking you when you're down. You know, you've said it, you've tried to take steps of healing, and then you go and say, okay, but now you're going to need to pay for my school. And so that was really hard, but I stayed. And then I even got to a point in my start of my recovery where my parents allowed me to study abroad. My senior year of college, I got to go for a semester and study in Italy. And it was a really hard time. I think I have no idea what they were thinking, but they were okay to let me go and to try it and do it. And I honestly look back at that as a really sweet moment for me. It was a really hard moment because it allowed me to also hide when you're thousands of miles away. But I also was able to figure out some things about myself that I just didn't know were there. And obviously just the culture and the experiences that I got to have were just amazing. And so I don't regret any of that. But I know it was a risk that they took with me. And so I appreciate that, but I know it was really hard for them. But no, I stayed in school. And then after school, I went and worked at Pine Cove for another summer, the camp out in East Texas. And my camp name is Grease Monkey, Grease spelled like the country.
Okay.
So that people call me GMO for short. And so I spent a summer out there, my last summer, and tried to go on full time at Pine Cove. I was in the interview process when then I broke my back.
That's right.
At Pine Cove. And because of that, I had to move home.
There we go.
Yeah. And then I landed back in Flower Mound. And that was where the healing, I think, officially started.
At the broken back. Oh,
the broken irony. Back. Yeah. Where, and I've told you this, I think the Lord was like, okay, you're not coming back to me. You're not coming back to me. I am calling out for you. It's like, okay, we're going to break your back. We're going to immobilize you for a little bit. So you stop running and you stop hiding. And now we're going to start to do some work. Yeah. I think coming home, it was when I started coming to the village. It was when I started to actually look at, I think I need to heal the inside of my body now. I think I need to go to church and actually look at the spiritual side of this healing versus just trying to have a counselor help you talk it away. Yeah. And so, it was a really pivotal moment for me.
Do you have a moment or maybe even a season? Because I had a season that led to a moment, but where like Jesus stops being like this guy over here that future Becca and him are going to be tight. Yeah. Where I know you're saying you got here and you wanted to look at, like, I've got to consider the spiritual side, like healing my inside. Is there a moment or a series of months or somewhere in there where Jesus moves from this kind of external character that you grew up singing about and studying about into a relationship with, where you're like, no, I'm pushing all my chips in here on this guy? Yeah.
I mean, I think it's coming to the TVC. It was hearing it's okay to not be okay. Yeah, amen. That was huge. Oh, it was hearing that, and then it was seeing people who genuinely loved the Lord and genuinely loved each other, and wanted to be around each other no matter what the circumstances were. So no matter what your junk was, no matter what issues you were going through, people kept coming back. Yeah. People kept coming back to each other. And I also think, I met Chris not too long after I started going to the village. And here was a guy who didn't look at me the way men had looked at me for years before that. And that was huge. It was a moment of, okay, you are putting people in my life who want to care for me. You must care for me. Yeah. Because this is not happening this is not coincidental. This is not just because I've been good and I'm getting my life back together. It was happening for a reason. And so I credit the community aspect of the village and the rawness of the village for allowing me to see God differently than I had before, and to want to open myself up to him, which is funny because he knows it all, but to allow myself to recognize that.
There is a difference between him knowing everything and you opening yourself up to that.
Yeah.
That's very, very different. And so you're opening up and going, okay, I see that you can be trusted with this, so I'm going to give it to you. I think it's a profound moment. And if you're listening or you're on a treadmill or you're, in your car or whatever, one of the things I love about the church, for all, not the village, but like the church, for all her imperfections and all her silliness, is it's one of the few places that we can tangibly experience the love, mercy, and grace of God. We can probably do that in other places, but that's the space for me where if you're listening to Becca's story or you've tuned into other episodes of The Overcomers, one of the themes that you hear is that people, like, they let the ugly side be seen and they're moved towards. And it's so hard for us to believe that God's like that I think one of the ways that God helps us learn, per Becca's testimony even in this episode, is to watch it happen with the saints, so that the saints become this tangible picture of the presence and power of God. And so if in your own life you're anxious about ever being seen or known, and again, this is a theme on this podcast, I think the risk that you take by continuing to hide from other people and trying to make yourself look better than you are is really robbing you of the love and grace that God has for you. Now, I want you to be safe. I don't want you to, I think you can trust the wrong people with your heart and it go bad for you. So I want you to be careful, but not continually make the decision to always keep the ugliest parts of you hidden, but to find that group of people where you can let it be seen. And I think that their response to that is a kind of way we experience tangibly, physically, not ethereally and spiritually, which is profound, but to physically be moved towards in your ugliness, I think it's one of the more powerful things you could ever see or experience. And so I'm so happy that you saw that, because there have been stories of the village where people have come out and it's been smashing. And so I'm glad yours isn't one of those.
Yeah, absolutely.
So from there, you meet Chris, you've got a little community forming.
Yeah.
Are you still like going to doctors and psychiatrists and all of the counselors and all of that, or?
Yeah, I was still going to counseling. I had such a bad taste in my mouth for counseling. I just didn't want to talk about things. I didn't want to unpack it. I didn't want to go through any wounds or any past trauma. I wanted someone to just say, okay, either take this or do that.
Yep.
And it's easy. It'll take 5 minutes and you'll be fine.
Yeah.
And I didn't want to have to work through the hard stuff. And honestly, I didn't for a while after, even though I was on a good path and with good people, I still had a lot that I had just shoved down pretty deep and said, I will handle that later. Yeah. Future Becca.
Future Becca, bless her heart. Just keep punting that ball forward. Yeah, she's going to have whenever it finally lands, however old she is, she's got work.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Well, there's this idea that, man, I would love to get as broad as possible into the Christian imagination, which is the only way through is through.
Yeah.
And there is no such thing as spiritual bypass. But people do spiritual bypass on themselves all the time, where they either do it with like Holy Spirit language, deliverance language, or they armor up with theological language. And what they're trying to do actually is not navigate through the pain that's occurred in the deeper parts of their soul, not mourn, not remember, and spiritual bypass just never works. It just means that it manifests itself in a different area. So you manage one area of behavior and then it just manifests itself in another area of behavior, so that the only way through is through. So if you are watching this or listening to this right now, and you find yourself just going, hey, future Becca, insert your name, future Matt, insert my name, like they'll handle this. No, you're going to handle it because you are future Becca, you are future Matt, you are future fill in your name. And so like a general rule of sanctification is the only way through is through. And so how did you go from what you're describing as kind of avoidance? I'm uncomfortable when we talk about these things. I don't want to do this hard work. To, was there something that started to force you to do that harder work, or did you just get tired enough to finally do the harder work? What was the thing that kind of gone, okay, I'm on a good trajectory, I've got good people around me. What was it that kind of triggered the, okay, I hate this stuff and I'm gonna lean into it?
I think it was a lot of things. I think I was tired.
Yeah.
I mean, let's be honest, it is tiring. I think having kids spurred that on. I mean, being married spurred that on.
Sure.
It wasn't about me. It was about Chris, and it was about what the damage that I am doing to myself, it affects him.
Yeah.
And it did. It was, one of the things that I love about you is how open you have been with Lauren about your marriage and how hard it was in the beginning. And Chris and I really felt that. We felt that there was a lot of fear and of frustration and of tension and of me just wanting to pull away from him because of everything that had happened. And I realized that if I don't move through this, if I don't understand this, it will affect my marriage. And then when we had kids, it's going to affect my kids. And there is no way that I am going to put this on them. I cannot do that. The love I have for them is so deep that there's no way. And then also as I got older in that community started to tighten.
Sure.
And I started to find the individuals who refused to let me go and who would say, hey, what you're saying to yourself right now, what you are projecting, the way you're treating yourself isn't okay.
Yeah.
We know you better than that. Like, you need to stop, and you need to get help.
Yeah.
Medication was a part of that healing. I am a believer that it is not wrong to take medication. I think when you have a broken leg, it's a crutch
Common
that
grace.
helps you walk.
That's right.
And so that was a part of it. That was something that helped me realign myself to be able to start to work through those things. And again, counseling, but really good biblical counseling became a part of it. And my friends and my community and my church. And then even just, being in spaces where you're walking through the Bible and learning more about who God is and not about who you are. It's God's story. And hearing
so important.
how powerful and how wonderful and how merciful God is. I was able to take my mind off of me and my problems and reorient it to, okay, I have a God who is bigger and mightier and who can handle anything I throw at him. And so I'm going to try to start to give those things over to him. And so the teaching that we have, the community, my husband, who just continues to grab me when I run away from him.
Chris is so great.
All of that. And then just the love of my kids who unconditionally love you, even though you won't give them that last piece of candy that they, it's bedtime. Okay. Yeah. That kind of love. But it was, a lot of that was really impactful in helping me push through. And I will say, going back to childhood wounds, going back to the wounds that I had felt in college, and this core fear of, identifying what my core fears were was really helpful as well. And so it's necessary. It's painful and necessary to go through that.
Well, I think that's the way, our enemy is repeatedly called the accuser. And so he's always just looking to take some sentence or some statement, put it on a loop, and completely distort our identity with it. And I read, it's been a while now, about There's literally a disease that trees get called heart rot. And what happens to them is when they're saplings or whatever, there's some kind of trauma, like a deer will like kind of try to get the velvet off their antlers with it, or something will happen. And it's just a cut on the side of the bark, but it doesn't do anything that like destroys the tree. It just puts an opening there.
Yeah.
And then the tree will continue to grow and get to full size. But because of that wound, it begins to rot from the inside out. And so there's never any visible sickness in the tree until it just falls over, until it breaks off or just crumbles under its own weight. And it's literally called heart rot. And I was just like, that's ridiculous. Because that's what you're describing. That there are these moments that maybe were malicious, but maybe they weren't malicious at all. Maybe it was just how we read it or heard it in our own iniquity and our own bent. And that becomes a script that if we're not careful, it's like under the surface. We don't even know we're thinking it. And then I think before we know it, we're listening to a voice that's no longer our voice, but we can't differentiate. We don't know that it's not our voice. It's really the voice of our enemy that seeks to still kill, and destroy. I went a little Southern there. Still kill and destroy. And so, I mean, what you're describing is having to go back and go, this isn't true. This is where this came from, and this isn't true. This isn't me. I'm not that. I'm not. And it's these agreements we make. We actually agree with those statements or those things that happen to us and become slaves to them. And so you go and you kind of start to deal with those old wounds that kind of led to the heart rot, that, kind of led to this big mess in your life. And now mom of boys and husband, and what's life like now? We're not too far removed from a lot of these things we're talking about. In fact, you're very much on this journey.
It is hard every day. It is hard. I think there are moments where I really struggle. I mean, not long ago, maybe last year, I had a really, really low point. And I remember I talked to Chris about it. I talked to some of my girls and just said, I am feeling things that I have felt back in those days. Like the anxiety and the level of those thoughts is at the same level that it was 15 years ago. And that makes me scared because that hasn't happened in a long time, but I'm feeling that now. And so, but because I have a system around me and people around me, and because my walk with the Lord is now much stronger, those feelings, those can be tampered, and those can go away, and I can move through them. If that was me 10 years ago, maybe not. It would have lasted longer, but I've gotten to a place now where I can recognize it and I can say it, which is big for me because I don't like talking about my feelings. And I can move through it. I will say there was a point maybe a year and a half ago where I talked to Chris and I said, I want to know more about what's going on with my body, why I don't look as the normal, athlete, figure that I am. And I think there might be something there actually, not just, for lack of trying, but I think there might be something physically there. I have pain in my legs. I bruise really easily. There's a heaviness there. There's something going on. We are now financially in a good place. We health insurance, all of those things where I can take time and go to a doctor and figure it out. And so I went to probably 4 different doctors and finally got a diagnosis of lipedema, which is a fatty tissue disease that is not, it does not respond to diet or exercise, which means that my body produces tissue that causes my body to look a little distorted than the normal human body. And when I got that diagnosis, I just wanted to laugh and cry at the same time. I kind of went like, okay, God, what are you doing? What are you doing here? Because I have been literally killing myself for decades to make myself look a certain way. And little did I know that there was something here that I was fighting. I was punching a brick wall.
Yeah.
Nothing was going to change. And it was a really hard day to get that. But then there's treatments for it, and there's things that I can do. And so the Lord was like, I felt him say, okay, yeah, this is a part of you. This is a part of your story. Does it make you any different in my eyes? No. Yeah. Does your husband still love you? Yes. Do your parents still love you? Yes. Are all of these things still true? Yes. This is just a part of your story. And so I now have things that I do that will help treat it and help mitigate some of the symptoms. There was a surgery. I was able to have a surgery to help treat some of it. But it's a little bit, it's again, bittersweet. It's like, okay, I now know some of the reason why, and it makes me frustrated because I wish I had those answers back then. But I'm also grateful that I know, and I'm also grateful that is not going to bring me down into the depths. And I am able to move past it and move through it because I have support and love and care. And now I know in my heart that my God loves me and is for me and is merciful and is gracious. And, you could go down that list of attributes and know that they are true in my heart and in my mind, not just, okay, I know it, but I'm not going to believe it.
Yeah.
And so, it's been hard. It's really, it's a daily struggle. It's a daily reset. It's something that I have to continue to go back to and remind myself of truths and remind myself of what I have come from and where I am going. And I honestly, where I work now has been amazing. It's been an amazing support because I can also now lean on my peers and my coworkers for support as well, which is just unusual in this landscape. To be able to have coworkers who love and care for you and support you in these things, and who look at you as a child of God and as a sister in Christ, and not as someone who has to achieve and who has to hit a certain goal and to meet a certain metric. We want to do those things. We want to steward those things well, but that's not the ultimate goal. And so, there's so many things in place. I like to just think of it as all these little soft pillows around me now that when I trip and I fall, I'm landing on something that is calm and kind and caring. So,
So we always kind of end an episode like this in my imagination, and it's not really my imagination. It's actually happening right now. Someone is listening to this, and people listen to podcasts, when they're out for a walk or when they're on a run or when they're getting dressed or on a treadmill or in their car or wherever. They're somewhere like that, and they've been listening to your story, and it resonates because it's their story. So it's a young woman who maybe is, just starting to purge, or maybe she's in college and it's starting to spiral. What would you say to her or him listening to this right now? How would you, if you could speak some hope, some encouragement into someone who was maybe in that moment you remember that was one of the darkest moments, what would you say to that young woman or young man?
Talk to someone. I think the longer I waited, the harder it got. And you can't hold stuff like that inside. And you would be amazed how receptive people are to you, how your problems your problems are not going to scare someone away. In fact, people want connection. They want to enter into to a connection with you. They want to hear your story because it makes them feel like they're important enough that you're sharing your story with them, and there's a gift in it for them. And so
that's right.
I think I would have. If I could talk to someone now, or if I could tell my college age self, it would have been to speak up sooner. And to say something to someone, because people are are willing and open to listen more than you might think they are. And you cannot do this alone. There's no way. Community is a biblical, God-given thing that we all need, and you have to have it. It's just necessary. So
I love that.
Yeah.
And I mean, if you're listening, if you listen to almost any of these episodes, that kind of becomes like, that's the moment.
Yeah.
The moment when we step out of darkness and into the light, and we bring someone in to this most shameful of places in our hearts. Like, I think to the episode, that's when healing starts to begin. Like when we finally say, I'm not okay. And I'm actually kind of embarrassed by that. In fact, I feel really embarrassed about this, but I hadn't been able to fix this, and I need some help. And so if you're listening, like, these are serious things, like to purge and to hide and to self-hate and to stuff down. This is like really dangerous thing for your soul. And I just pray you'd be encouraged by Becca's story of coming into the light and then being able to see the goodness of God in other people, and then begin to move towards right relationships that begin to heal, and then grant her the courage really to move through some of the old wounds that was leading to the heart rot that I was talking about. And so thanks for tuning in to this episode of The Overcomers. God bless you, and we'll be back soon.